Hi, my name is Damien. I've been living in New York City since 2016, and the last 7.5 years I've learned that there's history and novelty around every corner of this city. We're here today in NoLita, north of Little Italy, which is also known as Little Australia. There's a bunch of Australian cafes and restaurants in this area, so we're going to walk around and discover why Australians love this place in New York City. So come with me as we explore the Lower East Side, Little Australia and NoLita. Little Australia, NoLita and the Lower East Side are all clustered together around the lower eastern end of Manhattan. NoLita is shown here in blue, Little Australia is shown in purple, and the Lower East Side is shown in orange. I've also highlighted Allen Street and Orchard Street in red. One of the interesting things about NoLita is not only is it north of Little Italy, it's also very close to Chinatown. And that means you've got an incredible mix of restaurants. You've also got upscale furniture stores, clothing stores, cafes, restaurants, you name it. Anything you can want is right here in this area. Behind me here we have one of the first Australian cafes I discovered in New York City, Two Hands. So we're going to go in and have a coffee and see why this place is so special. We're quite lucky today. Normally this place is bustling with people on weekends, but it's a Thursday afternoon around 1 PM and the place is pretty quiet. So I'm going to have myself a oat milk flat white and just enjoy the serenity. Entry on Little Australia. Most Australia-owned and operated businesses are concentrated in NoLita between Mulberry and Maud Street. But I've actually found that most Australian-owned businesses are over in the Lower East Side. Behind me here we have the Bowery. The Bowery is a street that separates NoLita from the Lower East Side. So we're going to cross over there and check out the Lower East Side. Get to Little Australia, Chinatown, NoLita, one of your best bets is the subway system. Here we have the BD station on Christie Street. The BD runs right up into the Bronx and also into Brooklyn, so it's a very convenient way to get down to this part of town. Here we are in the corner of Houston Street and Allen Street. Allen Street used to be home to an elevated railway line. It was called the Second Avenue Railway Line. As you can see, the railway line is no longer here. But this particular street is important because it used to be, the railway line is important because it used to divide what is now considered the East Village and the Lower East Side. The East Village, what is now the East Village, was the home to the upper class people back in the day. It was considered where the well-to-do people live, and on the other side of the tracks is where the working people, the migrants, used to live. These days it's more of a mix, but we do distinguish between the East Village and the Lower East Side, and we're going to explore more of the Lower East Side today. Since the beginning of New York City, the Lower East Side has been the destination and home of migrant communities from across the world. One of the largest migrant communities, historically speaking, in the Lower East Side has been the Jewish community. There are synagogues and Jewish businesses all dotted all throughout the Lower East Side. One of the remaining ones is Katz's Delicatessen right behind me. They were established around 1903 in a different location, but they've been around for quite a while. And they're still operating here at the corner of Ludlow Street and Halston. And they're famous. They've got the world's best pastrami, according to sources in Wikipedia. So we're going to go in and see what they've got. I've ordered the half pastrami and rye with matzo ball soup, and they've given me a little sample here, so I'm going to try that. It looks pretty good. It's like corned beef, I think, but maybe a little sweeter. Very delicious. Yes, please. All right, we're going to try this pastrami and rye. See how we're going. I can get my hands around it. It's kind of falling apart as I pick it up. That's pretty damn good. Here we are on Orchard Street, one of the most famous streets in the Lower East Side. It's called Orchard Street because there used to be an orchard running along this street. And it's also famous for push peddlers. Push peddlers were people who used to push their carts up and down the street, selling their wares, mostly working class. But these days, this street is home to very upper class, very fancy galleries, coffee shops, jewelry stores, clothing stores, you name it. It's all up and down this street, and the street closes on Sundays, so it's open to pedestrians who can walk all up and down the street and buy some very expensive jewelry, art, or clothing. So I'm currently standing on Orchard Street in the Lower East Side, and around this area there's a smattering of Australian owned and operated businesses. One of the examples is Good Thanks. Good Thanks behind me, a cafe right here. And as most Aussies know, Good Thanks is the standard response when someone asks, "How are you?" The largest migrant groups to the Lower East Side was the Jewish community, and they had a significant impact on this area. Evidence of that is right behind me here. It's the Kadosha synagogue. I hope I got that pronunciation right. It's the only example of a Greek Jewish synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. This particular building behind me was completed in 1927, and it's protected by as a landmark in New York City by New York City Law. So here we are, we're just off the back of Halston Street between Norfolk and Essex Street. This building behind me here is pretty newly developed, but what was here before is a more interesting story. Back in 1967, the city demolished 20 acres of tenement buildings because they were not suitable for living in. And those tenement buildings were home to about 1,800 low-income Puerto Rican families. At the time, the city promised those families that they would have their homes rebuilt, but it wasn't until 2012 when the city finally approved, after much debate and much politicking, the city finally approved a mixed-use development. And this is it. We're going to go and have a look inside there, and it's currently home to the Essex Market. So we're going to have a look in there in a moment. you're a history buff, one of the things you can do in the Lower East Side is come on down to the Tenement Museum right here on the corner of Orchard Street and Delancey. It's $30 and they will take you on a walking tour of some of the old tenement buildings. Tenement buildings are notable because they were built before the city of New York passed a law around about the early 20th century. The law required developers to have access to both light and air inside residential buildings. So you can see how the working class families used to live in these conditions before that law was passed in the early 20th century. So the Lower East Side has a long history of accepting migrant populations from across the world. It has history with Jewish population, Germans, Ukrainians, Italians, Australians. These days, most of the migrant community is Puerto Rican and Dominican. Around a quarter of the population in the Lower East Side is white. Almost a quarter is African American. And about 40% in total is Latino or Hispanic of any race. So it's a very diverse neighborhood with a long history of migration from all across the world. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed my tour of Little Australia, NoLita and the Lower East Side. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and also put a comment on which neighborhood you'd like to see me tour next, or even some other questions you have about New York City. And see you next time. Testing the microphone. Here we are at the intersection of Allen Street and Houston Street. We are on Orchard Street, one of the most famous streets in all of the Lower East Side. It is famous, it's called, I'm going to start that again. Here we are on Orchard Street, one of the most famous streets in the Here we are on Here we are on Orchard, no, let's start that again. I'm thinking Oxford. Here we are on oh my God. Here's the news. Is it recording? Right, where are we? Norfolk and